Hey everybody, welcome to Cider Week Finger Lakes 2020. I am so incredibly thrilled to welcome you. I'm Scott Ramsey from the New York Cider Association, and this is a special version of Cider Week Finger Lakes this year. I don't know about you all, but I am a little bit exhausted by everything that's been going on around us, so I'm really thrilled to come together and be together in community and celebrate over cider. And some of our events are happening in person where we can stay safe and be socially distanced, but then we have a lot of really awesome online events, much like this one we're about to enjoy, throughout the course of the week. So you can check out ciderweekfingerlakes.com. It's just ciderweekflx.com for our full event schedule. But it is now my pleasure to introduce to you Autumn and Ezra from Eve's Cidery. Welcome so much.
Thank you.
And also to introduce to you Mark Grimaldi from Cellar. They're on the Commons in Ithaca. And we are going to have an amazing tasting. Mark's going to lead us through a tasting with Autumn and Ezra of some of Eve's Cidery amazing work. I have already cracked open my bottle of Autumn Gold, so I'm going to be behind the scenes tasting along with you all. So I'm going to jump off, and Mark and Autumn and Ezra, you can take it away.
Cool.
Thanks, Scott.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. So welcome, Autumn and Ezra. I have been, I think, tasting your guys' cider all the way back to before I even lived in the Finger Lakes. I lived on Long Island. I was working in the wine business. Used to go into Manhattan a lot. Found your ciders at Astor Wine and Spirits. Long time ago. Maybe 10, 12 years ago. Is that about when did you guys start making cider?
That really brings back memories talking about New York City and Astor Wine and Spirits.
We started making cider. We got our license in 2002, so 18 years.
I always sort of considered you guys, like, whether it's true or not, sort of like the OGs of Finger Lakes cider, New York cider. That's kind of how we've been selling your cider in the shop since we opened, and it's sort of like how I present you guys. Were there a lot of other cideries around in 2002 when you started?
No, there was.
As a matter of fact, I wasn't even around.
It's true. There was Bellwether.
Yeah. Another OG.
They started in like 98 or something. I don't know for sure. But around in the late 90s. And in New York State, no, because I remember kind of combing, like always being excited to like hear of somebody at a cider mill or something who was pressing apple juice and fermenting it, but really like people would call it apple wine back then.
Right.
Because like for the first maybe 12 years that we had this business, pretty much the predominant thing that we did when we talked about what we were making was explain to people that yes, it has alcohol in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really changed. That's really, really changed. You can say cider and there isn't this assumption that, oh, it's like in a jug and it's unfiltered juice,
Yeah.
It's really changed.
When I started actually working for Eve Cidery, my job was to go down to Green Market at Union Square, and I actually got paid to do that. It seems almost.
And then you got promoted.
And then I got promoted to no salary. But yeah, so thinking about Astor Wine and Spirits really brings me back to Union Square Green Market and talking to people for whom like cider was, like Autumn said, like in a plastic jug, just pressed and unpasteurized, hopefully.
But you kind of got your start. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a little influence there from Farnham Hill, was it?
Yeah.
Is that sort of why you're doing this? Did that jumpstart you, or?
Steve Wood had a vision for cider that, was grounded in was grounded in sort of like the English cider tradition, because his wife relatives in England. but he did, you know, he at a time when like nobody else kind of put all these pieces together, he put all the pieces together and articulated them in this way that, like, to me, when I first heard about what he was doing in 1999, I remember, it just floored me. It just blew me away because like, I kind of like got the wine thing a little bit. I was like just starting to like be interested in wine and this whole sort of idea that there's like like specific varieties that you ferment and they grow in different places and, you know, and then but I was also working in an orchard and to sort of have those two things come together, like in my mind, that definitely was Steve. He did that for me. Yeah.
Was that Cummins Nursery?
Well, James Cummins, who's Stephen Cummins' brother, Steve owns Cummins Nursery, and James is the orchard that I was working on, and he's still involved with our business. And their father bred the Cornell Geneva rootstock series, and their family has been growing apples, not here in Illinois, but they're 7th generation orchardists. So lots of apple knowledge there that we got.
Yeah, I also sort of, when I think of you guys, you know, we have a lot of cideries around us now and in New York and in the country, and, you know, even a lot being imported now. But, you know, when I think about you guys, I always sort of do portray you as unoriginal, but I also portray you like as sticking to your guns. Like you're doing what you're doing. You believe in it. You have a style about your ciders. You don't want to really veer the course too much because you have this feels like you have a very strong sense of what you want your cider to be. And you wanted to portray those apples. You don't want to get in the way of those apples, and you want to really highlight these varieties that you have, and you want to make them dry. And you want to make them tannic and rustic and have acid, and you want to make a really traditional cider. And that's sort of, I feel like your thing, and that's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about, do you have your own orchards? How big are they? How old are some of the trees in there in the orchard? And are you solely using your apples for your ciders?
Well, we have collectively with our partner James, I guess you could say 4 orchards, ranging in age from like just grafted to like 35 years old.
Yeah, early 80s they were planted.
That James planted in his orchards in Newfield. And when we got onto the land here in Venetton, we started planting, but Autumn had, before that, like right sort of at the very beginning of the business, planted an orchard with her dad on land that her parents own, kind of adjacent to us in Venetton. So yeah, we have a range of ages of trees, sites here in Venetton, and then James's site in Newfield about 10 miles away, and a range of growing styles, you know, freestanding, almost conventionally sized to trellised apples. Yeah, I appreciate your comment about us kind of having a vision, kind of sticking to it. I feel that is kind of something.
Yeah, I look at it as traditional, and I mean that in a really good way, as you know, say an old world winemaker, or, you know, a Belgian brewer, or somebody that knows their style, knows what they like, thinks, you know, what their traditional cider, beer, wine is to their area, and that's their terroir, and that's the style of cider they, you know, or the beverage they want to make. And, you know,
I feel like even now we haven't made cider that we think is the best cider we can make. I agree with you. We have this like vision that,
I'm not saying that you don't make the best, that you're you're not looking to improve or grow.
Like there's things I think that autumn has brought that autumn continually like brings into the that I can think of in the cider making process that always to me seems sort of breaking the mold. Go ahead.
But I think just to your point, Mark, that there's sort of like a guiding principle there or a guiding vision, and that's kind of why we're in it. And there's the whole backstory. I mean, someday at Cider Week we should have a panel about is it worth it to have a cider business? Or
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you can relate. You're a small business owner with but with kids, it's been a crazy decade. But I think the thing is like our engagement is it really is at that level of I don't know, passion is too overused a word, but just that excitement, that thing that like kind of keeps us like tuned in and interested and getting better and all of those things is that we could make a cider from our fruit grown in specific locations and tell a story with that. And so how do you tell that story, And I just want to follow up because you asked a specific question, which was, do we grow all of our own fruit? And so there's a little bit of a story behind that, which is that I think about, was it 5 years ago? I can't remember the year we made the decision. Yeah, it was 5 years ago. We made the decision because we did purchase fruit. And we are trying, it's really challenging to match, right? Like there's demand, and then there's like matching that with production. And then you have like this orchard that you're trying to establish that takes, 3 to 6 years to even bear a crop. You know what I mean? And then the varieties, you thought this was great. And then you start getting a lot of it and you're like, what was I thinking? It's complicated, Yeah. So it's very helpful to be able to like buy fruit from other growers and other places. Sort of evens things out. I think we just sort of came to this like personal decision that we wanted to only make cider with the fruit that we grow, because that was why we're in it. Yeah. When we're not in it to like grow a business, as fast as we can.
And foraging, you do some of that too.
What's that?
And foraging, you do some of that.
Right. And if we do purchase fruit, we say it specifically on the label. I think
I just wanted to respond to a question really quick. Yeah. We're going to try 3 ciders today. The first one we're going to open is Autumn's Gold.
Nice.
Go ahead. And maybe you could explain the name.
I don't know what the name. I guess the name.
Or you could just disavow people of the impression.
James is a quirky and eccentric character. But he has like a knack. He like names everything. He names his car.
It's true.
All of his tractors have names.
Has a name.
Yeah. all of his like little like areas in his orchards, they all have a name. And anyway, he's a good namer. He's really good at it. And so he came up with this name.
Named our kids. I'm just kidding.
He came up with this name like a long time ago, when we were sort of having this idea that we would have a sort of signature bittersweet cider blend. Yeah. Change every year, but kind of we would always have it. And it never occurred to me, this is how naive I was when I started this business. It never occurred to me that I would ever meet somebody or talk face to face with somebody about my cider. And really? So pretty soon.
Is that true?
Yeah. So I was like, Autumn's Gold, whatever, that's fine. Well, pretty soon I start finding myself in like situation after situation where people are like, was that cider named after you?
Right. Like, let's change the name.
or going back to that green market reference where you talk to like 1,000 people and everybody's saying question all the time. People will say like, oh, is your wife's name Eve?
Right.
I used to get that a lot.
So yeah, I think one other thing I wanted to touch on was with you being sort of, I look at you as very traditional. I have seen more recently through the years how you are you're not looking to mask your fruit. A lot of people, as they make cider, might say, well, let's go ahead and put a bunch of fruit in this, or let's bourbon barrel it, or let's hop it, or let's do that. You're looking to get better in just your processes of making cider and the blends you're using. And, you introduced a pet net style. You started introducing some foraged apples and, pears and things like that. So that's how I view you, as sort of looking to enhance and improve your process and your ciders from the ingredients that you have, and not masking or going crazy by hopping and doing, wild things with that to sort of
we spend
the wow factor,
We spend so much energy and effort into growing our fruit.
Yeah.
So
that's so important.
That way then by the time you get to the point of like putting it in the bottle, that's what it has to be about, because it's.
And I think that's why I do, the other cideries do. We talk about cider like it's wine, because it really has those characters. You focus on the growing of the fruit, just like a vineyard manager or a grower would in their vineyard, tending to their grapes. It's, you're doing the same with your trees, and it really starts from the orchard, just like it starts from the vineyard. So, well, let's jump into the cider, because I feel like people probably want to have a drink.
Or they're drinking.
So the first one is Autumn's Gold. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the apples in this? And this is one of your original ciders. I think this is probably one of the ones I bought at Astor 12 years ago or whatever. So give us a little background on this one.
So my first love in cider is English and French bittersweet apples. And they're fruits that have a very specific flavor and aroma profile, and tannin, and lots of tannins. But
you can pick the tannins up in this cider immediately.
And not just there's a range of different tannic qualities, but yeah, so like what I want to have in a bittersweet cider, like for me, like what I'm longing for is just like a really kind of like chalky tannin, a drying tannin, like a kind of like a warming tannin. So Fricon Rouge is a French bittersweet that we've just come to adore over the years. I wish one of those things where I wish I planted so much of that,
Well, you made that single bottling of that as well, which
is
really good. That's still cider.
Yeah. And so this is 20% Fricon Rouge. That's sort of like the tannic backbone of this cider. And then it's got 40% Akani, 20% Golden Russet, and 10% Tiedemann's Early Worcester. And so those apples have different different aromatic profiles that we love, and we use them a lot in our blends. And I just want to say really quickly that because of the way that we farm, and because of the varieties that we farm, and I can go into that more in a minute, but there's a lot of biennialism in our orchards. So that's one factor that plays into why a blend like Autumn's Gold isn't a formula where we do this exact same thing every year. Because this year we had 0 Fricon Rouge. They only crop every other year.
Right.
And then also it's sort of like we have developed this process of blending, which is where we kind of sit down in January, February, and sort of just assess, like take in what the vintage, I shouldn't say vintage, I'm trying to change that, homage, what the homage.
Yeah. Like our tanks are not very big, and if it's a decent year, we'll have 25 of them. And so the mathematical challenge is just it almost makes my brain.
But you know, there's like, because we've done it that way for so many years, it's sort of amazing, this thing that it's just like, it's a sort of a process that we've adopted, which is that you will find synergy. That's different than just having like, oh, this is good and this is good, and like put it together, it'll be good. It's that somewhere in there is that magic thing where they all come together. And because we're just pressing and fermenting like per the season, and blending and bottling per the season, every season sort of has like a different thing to give.
When you're doing an Autumn's Gold blend, obviously you're doing trials and you're, taking different lots and what are you looking for? What's a running theme in Autumn's Gold that you look for? Is there one?
Well, probably that it has a kind of a strong tannic center to it, right?
Yeah.
The bittersweet flavor profile that I love, which is sort of, have you ever walked in an orchard like in late November? And all the leaves have come off the trees and they're like damp and they're on the ground, and there's the apples that didn't get harvested and the mice have eaten kind of like half of them, and they're sort of sitting there. They're still sweet, like an overripe, but a little bit like, a little bit going.
I know exactly that smell.
And the air's crisp and cool, and maybe there's a smell of like wood smoke from a fire in the distance. Yeah. To me, that's Autumn's Gold, and that's sort of what I want to have in the cider.
Yeah. Before we move on to the other cider, do you want to just maybe share a little bit of your process?
Cider making process.
Yeah, a little bit of your process. Just when you look to harvest, anything special you're doing, like at press. After you're pressing, are you macerating? Some of the technical stuff.
Well, we pick when they're ripe, and sometimes that means picking maybe twice.
For a lot of the European cider apples, it means picking off the ground.
Yeah,
when they're ripe.
When Autumn was describing like the aromas of this orchard associated with like the cider, kind of the cider apple, or the aroma of the Autumn's Gold. One interesting fact that I think you wouldn't know, almost very few people have experienced it, is the kind of rot of a bittersweet. It's interesting, like a bittersweet cider apple, they don't like rot like a dessert apple does, which, like has a liquidy, like fermenting area on it, which is vinegary smelling. Like a bittersweet is like,
it's analogous to getting botrytis in grapes.
You want that rot.
Yeah, well, it's just fascinating. We've talked about this. This is something like we've talked about this for a lot, because sometimes I wonder if that's like this quality is something actually that people selected for, because cider is a beverage that is it's traditional in the sense that it's people making it for a long time before there was refrigeration and all of the things that like support our modern fruit industry. So anyway, an interesting little aside. But yeah, so we press. Different from grapes, apples can sit after harvest for a period of time, not too long, unless of course you put them in cold storage, which
that's called sweating, right?
Yeah. So in the process of sweating, they continue to ripen off the tree. Like you've picked a pear before, or you've bought a pear, and it's like it continues to ripen without the tree and the leaves. You have to get it at the right time, because if you do too early, it's not going to ripen. So then we'll do like pressing sessions when we've congregated apples in the barn and sweated them. And then we do field blends. So some stuff we just know it's going to ferment together. It always does. And And we also do single variety fermentations. And like today, we did it just before I came in here. We finished a Kingston Black press and an Albee Hill press, which is like a single orchard press, but it was like a smattering of a bunch of different things. We do our fermentations with wild yeast. So our process with that is we do some spontaneous fermentations, but a lot of our fermentations we do by creating a starter culture with apples that we've picked from the orchard, and we get it going, before the press day, so that we can add it to the tanks. And yeah, I don't know what else. What else do you want to know about the process?
Maybe a little bit of what happens after pressing. There's different styles, I think, of cider making where maybe Europeans might, leave the juice in contact to oxidize and things like that, in contact with the pumice. Do you do anything like that? Or are you just, pressing right off?
It all depends. Like I've got like all these little, that's another thing we did today is we ground up a bunch of crab apples. So I'm macerating the crab apples before we press them.
We've done it to Kingston Black, where we had enough Kingston Black to do the experiment of macerating it, having the pumice sit and begin fermenting, and then press it versus pressing and fermenting.
Yeah, one thing about your ciders is they're always the color in them is always so like bold, and it looks like there's some oxidation going on, but it's not oxidation, but there's always a deeper color in your ciders versus a lot of ciders you see on the market that are light and yellow. You kind of always have like the Pugets. It's a darker color. Does that have anything to do with your process?
I think I have an opinion about that.
Okay.
I think that it has to do with using very tannic apples.
That's what I think too.
Just because no matter what you do, there is like when you press a cider apple, like think about it this way: if you bite into an apple, right? If you slice apples and you lay them out, they start to brown eventually, right? Yeah. When they're exposed to oxygen. If you slice a cider apple and put it out, it's going to brown instantly. Okay. And it's very dark, dark, dark brown. So some of it's just like the very high polyphenolic content and also the types of polyphenolics. I don't know. Have you ever seen like a Kingston Black cider that is light?
No.
So that's one piece of it. It's
not that there's like tons out there to take a survey of.
That's one piece of it. But another piece of it is, I would say, if you take a cider apple, or you take an apple like a Northern Spy, which still has tannins, but is lower in tannins and has like a lot of acidity. And you treat it the exact same way in the cellar. And we've done this before. But one of them is grown in our orchard, which is certified organic. It's holistically managed. There's grass and clover growing right up under the trees. If there's very, very little irrigation, shallow soil, roots like fighting with rocks, and then you have a cider that is grown on a rich, fertile soil. It's conventionally managed. There's herbicide strips underneath it. The foliage is protected by multiple pesticide sprays. It's got plenty of irrigation. It produces large, heavy crops of big apples. Even if you get the sugar content to be the same, which it usually won't be, I think there's another component of juice quality, which I like to think of it as dry extract, because that's sort of like the way it was framed to me, like from a wine perspective. But like the literal minerals that are in it, it's dense. It's not just dense from sugar. It's dense from all these other components that make up a juice besides water.
Right.
So some of it's just that too.
Yeah. we got a question from Paolo. He wants to know what kind of press you guys use, and he wants to know, does cider go through a malolactic fermentation like wine?
Those are good questions. Well, there's a nice long story about the rack and cloth press that we have, but to cut to the chase, it's a rack and cloth press. Autumn discovered it where, in like Illinois or something?
No, I got it in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania.
There you go.
Used from an orchardist. But
Yeah,
it's an
great deal.
it's an old school rack and cloth press that was made by Owasco Orchard Equipment Supply Company in Massachusetts, like a small family company. It's super simple, kind of elegant design. It's more work to set up and clean than like a continuous feed press, like a belt press or an accordion press or something like that. But
it's quite efficient.
it has very good juice quality, and it's ours. We have it.
I mean, Autumn paid like $2,500 for it.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
But it was a time in the early 2000s when all these laws were being passed about apple juice, and all of a sudden these growers who've been doing it for generations had to get like a pasteurizer and add chemicals and do all this stuff, and a lot of people just got out. They were like, no way.
Wow.
So,
Man.
And
the malolactic.
Malolactic. I don't like malolactic myself, and we avoid the cider going through a malolactic.
that said, cider is absolutely wants to instantly go malolactic because differently from grapes, almost all the acid in apple juice is malic.
Yeah.
So it's just like this rich, a rich stew waiting for malolactic bacteria to jump in there. The problem is if they do, then you have nothing but lactic acid. You know what I'm saying? Because the malolactic conversion is going to, take away that acid.
Yeah. How do you stop it?
Well, one of the things is temperature is really important. So our barn is like uninsulated and sort of mostly has like a swing with the weather. So we have a major goal that is to like wrap up all of our fermentations and get them bottled or doing something else, like doing a secondary fermentation and so on and so forth, by March when it starts to warm up, because that's kind of when everything's going to wake up and start going again.
So you want it to stay cold to prevent the malolactic.
Malolactic likes at warm temperature. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's move on to the this little small tiny production cider called Puget's Spice right here. So everybody, if you can, Puget Spice. I love the clear bottle, by the way. I think that is awesome. Keep doing that. Love to see the color of what's inside.
I know. It was like,
I changed it too because the first batch we got was green, and then like, hey,
we ran out of bottles.
When I started delivering to restaurants in the city, we weren't distributed by anybody.
Yeah.
We used to, all of our bubblies are champagne method. Our process, you ask about our process used to be to like flip the bottles so the yeast would go to the mouth into the cardboard box that they would ultimately be sold in. And so they would they'd be carried into a cooler, they'd be carried out of a cooler because we chill them before disgorging. And then they would be, then I would pull the bottle out of the boxes and disgorge, and the box would get sprayed, and then it would get stored somewhere weird. And so our boxes were like almost like bags. And at the time, it didn't dissuade people from buying from us. But like one time I overheard or apologized or something for like a particularly bad box. And they were like, either two people talking to each other or something. And they're like, oh yeah, it's an Eve's box. so
disgorging.
You gotta like
disgorging in the box.
Come a long way. But I don't know why we never thought of clear bottles. It's like for the Pet Nat, Autumn thought clear bottles, and then that started Yeah, a clear bottle. It looks so. I guess the brown or whatever is supposed to protect the cider or whatever, but the clear bottle is so eye catching, especially with our daughter's label on it.
Yeah,
That's freaking great. Shout out.
And I think cider is so tannic and it has so much acidity that I'd say it's probably pretty protected no matter what you're going to do to it. And most people are drinking them pretty young.
I feel like is a good cider to be drank young.
Yeah.
So
tell us about Puget Spice.
Well, you want to go?
Yeah, so I have a story about Puget Spice. This and by the way, this isn't all Puget Spice. It's called wild Puget Spice because it has wild apples in it, and they sort of make a base for the Puget Spice, which is a gumball sized apple. I mean, it's tiny. It's extremely high sugar and high acid and high. It's extremely high everything. It's over the top. So its character is huge.
And if you look at the tree and if it has a crop, it looks like it's just a stack of gumballs. There's like no tree. There's not much tree to it.
So the story with the Puget Spice is that I got some trees from Cummins Nursery, from James's brother, and he was kind of like, oh, there's this new apple. It's called Washington State WSU A by P crab. It's a disease-resistant crab. You should try it. Okay, whatever. Threw it in somewhere. The tree never did anything. It just sat there and
grew a few inches a year.
Yeah, it just was like this diminutive kind of like, it wasn't like feeble tree. And then it would get just like these profuse blooms of apples, set a heavy crop, and then wouldn't ripen them. And so I thought, maybe it's like too long of a growing season because it's from Washington State or something like that. And we almost ripped them out.
I think the truth is we were going to rip them out, but either we didn't have a crop.
No, I wanted to try one more time. And so I just cut them back really, 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 really hard to force like a lot of vigorous growth. And they did, and they grew up to the top wire. And 2 years later, they set a gorgeous heavy crop. And they weren't ripening because they weren't, I was overcropping them basically is what I came to realize. And so, yeah, we were like, whoa, oh, well, that's good. We didn't throw them out. Let's try to make a cider with them. And then when we had it, I got so excited that we, top grafted over the next 2 rows in the orchard.
Wow.
And one other thing about this apple, which feels really exciting to me, is the year that we had this crop last year. It was very, very wet, and it had been, I'm so sorry. And it had been wet for 2 years in a row. 18 and 19 were both extremely wet years. And in those 2 years, a new disease that's sort of like a climate change fueled disease that's coming up from the south came here and it just passed through all these people's orchards, organic, conventional, through the wild trees and defoliated trees everywhere. And it was this very stark thing that in our orchard, there were a few varieties that didn't get Marsanina, and Puget Spice was one of them. And it was bred to be disease resistant against apple scab or whatever. You better go get that just because it's, sorry. So that's like really exciting for an organic orchardist, and also like as a farmer who's facing the challenges of climate change, to find a tree that's
found like an amazing cider apple that's resistant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this is
so
like
I was running to get the phone for my daughter. She's out on her bicycle, but we just want to make sure that she's okay.
Oh yeah. So this is a really, like you were explaining the apple, this cider is pretty wild. It's really, really bold. It's really like high octane aromatically. It's got body, it's got tannin, it has acidity. It's like, it's full of flavor. Where did you, what the other 75%, those just, are those from apples that you yearly might or biannually might go forage? Are they from certain parts of New York or where you're at?
They're from around our farm, basically. We live So we live just about 18 miles south of Ithaca. It's very rural here. And it's a lot of like steep hillsides and dirt roads and abandoned farms.
Yeah.
And so it's just a haven for wild apples.
Yeah. Cool. Do you make this cider in the same way that you make your other ciders, or is there anything different in the process?
Well, it's really difficult to get those little apples to go up the apple elevator.
That's true.
That's one thing.
That is a really good question, because I can't remember if we macerated those crabs. I don't think we did.
I don't think so.
No.
But I can't remember. Were they fermented or did they get
No, they got
with the wild?
blended in. Yep,
Okay.
it was like a field blend. Yep.
And it's traditional method?
It's traditional method.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think it was like a really fun, sort of gratifying experience, like as a cider maker, because sometimes you're just kind of like, all right, do that one, like stick it over here in this barrel, whatever. And then when we tasted it, we were like, oh, hello.
Yeah.
I think the primary was in oak, was it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So you're doing some ciders in primary fermentation in oak and some in stainless steel tank?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not for the extraction in the oak, but for the micro-oxygenation.
Sure. You're probably doing an older.
Yeah, they're old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome.
I'm curious if anybody's curious about what this would go with, food-wise.
What would you pair it with?
I was trying to think about it during the day without having tasted it. It's really like, I feel like it's got that wild apple characteristic of being like very fresh, like a pet nat type cider. So I was trying to think of what's like a fresh, not like, I don't think oysters.
I really loved it with the venison stew.
I knew you were going to say that. I don't know why.
And maybe there's something about the wild,
the gaminess.
I don't know, but to me this is like it's so like bright and fresh, but it also has like the heft and the weight.
I know,
so you can take like something like the stew, you brown the meat, and then you put
I went to meat personally when you asked that. Like I almost went to like some sort of maybe like Moroccan dish or like something with a gamey, spicy, even like a curry or something.
Yeah, totally a curry.
It's such a spicy cider, and there's so much acidity and so much tannin that it can stand up to meat. Right. Really cool.
Well, that's a cool thing just to like make that pitch for cider in general. I think I just want more people to just go ahead and try that pairing, because I think sometimes people are like a little bit stuck on either, it's easy drinking and they need it to be a little bit sweet, or they're stuck on like pairing it with apples. you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you remember when we did at the Cellar door? I think you were there. We had a big event where we did like a cheese and cider pairing. First of all, let me go out on the.
There was Pete Messmer. I did maybe that one.
I don't know. Maybe you guys didn't come pour, but we did like 4 ciders, and we did 4 different cheeses. I do not like wine and cheese personally. I don't know why. They're not. I just don't want to really have a lot of different cheeses with my wine. Something about the cheeses being almost can be too much. Certain things, but cider and cheese is like the bomb. Yeah. Especially your cider with like a really, really good cheddar. I think we might have did your cider with a Cabot cloth bound cheddar, and it was like out of this world.
Yeah. I agree with you.
I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's such a good pairing. And then we did some of like the Basque and Asturian ciders with like a blue cheese, and we did.
Yep.
It was great. But I think if you out there, if you're listening, try pairing ciders with different cheeses.
Yeah, totally. We drink a lot like when we're making dinner, and then we're not really hungry, and then we eat dinner because you're always like noshing
on cheese.
Cheese.
Yeah.
When you're eating dinner.
That's the routine.
That's the routine.
I think I may have had also. We may have tried for the next cider that we're going to have your essence with blue cheese.
Yeah, we always say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes with.
But maybe we should move on to that cider if everybody has their bottle of essence. This is Eve's ice cider, and maybe I'll preface this with saying that there are lots of ice ciders out there. There are few ice ciders that are actually made in the way that you guys make it. Again, going back to your traditional, you're sticking to your guns with being traditional. A lot of people will take at least in the wine world, they'll take their grapes and stick them in the freezer and then press them. The real ice wine producers will wait for them to freeze on the vine. You guys sort of do a hybrid thing where you're not necessarily letting your apples freeze, but you do let your juice freeze, right? Or
it's cryo concentrated versus cryo extracted. So if you think about a grape or a bunch of grapes, you could imagine like you could just like squeeze it in your fist and juice would come out. And so with apples, right, you can't do that exactly. So kind of the physics and chemistry of it works a little bit differently with apples, and you can do it with cryo extraction. But one time we did an experiment where we did that, and
I've done it twice. I think I did 2
where you've actually worked with like a frozen apple or frozen.
Yeah, and it makes a ice cider that's much more delicate and very, very pale and light colored. And I think what I think is going on is I think that in the cryo extraction method, in the cryo concentration method that we do, there's just a lot more oxidization of the sugar that's going on, because so ideally you have a situation where the cider is freezing and then thawing a little bit and freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing. And through that process, there's a sugar gradient that's created where the water molecules start to freeze and the sugar molecules become separated from them. But through that process, I think it's oxidizing, so I think we just ended up really loving the kind of caramely oxidized flavors that come from that process, and we ultimately went with it, and it's easier.
So
my memory is that there's a disaster story.
Oh, stop with your disaster story.
So just so people know that, to break it down, you're pressing the apples, you're letting the juice freeze. The water will freeze before the concentrated sugar juice of the apple. And it's at that point where you separate them and then ferment the concentrated juice. Do you put it in a barrel? Are you doing it in stainless? Stainless.
Yeah, it's a beguiling fermentation.
Because it's so rich. There's such a high sugar.
I don't think we've ever finished a primary fermentation of essence in less than like 6 months.
Oh.
I think one time it took a year.
It goes very slowly.
Like, come on, we're out of ice cider. We need.
And you're not doing anything to prevent the fermentation from. It's naturally stopping this sweet because the yeast just can't handle that much.
Well,
it's not a vigorous fermentation. We do when we decide that it's time, we do put it in the cooler and then filter it.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't think that you could, because that sugar is there and it's like this super rich environment, even though it's inhibiting to the yeast, I think that it would probably still continue to ferment very, very slowly if you don't filter it.
Let's just say the cider maker would maybe not have as good a night's sleep if it wasn't filtered.
Right. The other thing about ice ciders, ice wines is this could be something maybe with your blending, but maybe you can tell us about the apples in this, but also it is very sweet, but it still isn't cloying because you still have so much acidity in there. Like it's almost puckering your mouth at the end. big sweet introduction.
Yeah.
Version has do you remember what the acidity is?
It's not on here. It's something crazy like 16 grams per liter.
Wow.
Titratable acidity. It's something pretty crazy. This particular bottling of ice cider is the first time that we've ever tried putting wild forage seedling apples in it. So it's got a lot of tannin in addition to acidity, in addition to sugar. It's a mouthful.
It is, yeah.
Yes, you know.
I haven't, is it a vintage thing or?
This
No.
one's like the combination.
Like, you mean like, why did we make it this way?
No, I feel like I've had many different variations of essence through the years. This one is by far seems to be more on that herbaceous, like you put sage on it. Like it's more on that aged quality, that sage, that relatives thing.
I think
And less of the like apricot and stone fruit that I remember Essence having.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's the wild fruit. I think it's the varieties of apples that are contributing to that more savory character.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people don't eat white chocolate, so this is kind of like a funny thing to say, but this cider goes really, really well with white chocolate.
I can see that. That's cool. Yeah, I can totally see that. And it's 10%.
Yeah. If anybody out there has a question, send it in. What would you pair with? Okay. What would you pair this with?
The ice cider, well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, as you mentioned, ice cider, it really goes well with blue cheese. What do you think? I'm thinking like apricots dipped in chocolate.
A butter cookie?
I would put this with some sort of tart, like a like a cobbler or a not too sweet dessert tart or something like that. Cool. So yeah, is there anything you guys want to maybe talk about before we wrap things up? It's been close to an hour, so we don't want to keep everybody too long, but is there anything else that you can maybe tell us that we haven't learned yet?
I just wanted to say that somebody wrote that Puget Spice and brunch is a good combo, which sounds really good to me because I'm taking this Sunday off.
Cider.
Yeah, don't be afraid to drink your ciders with brunch and eggs. I mean, the great pairing is sparkling wine and eggs, so you can almost just slip that cider in there instead of your sparkling wine.
That's right.
And that's what's so cool about cider is that it's really interchangeable. Like we talk about cider as wine. It really, really, really deserves the attention that wine. It has the character of wine. It has all of the same qualities. Even you can even age it. We've had old Eve ciders, and I think not even that long ago, you guys maybe released some, or we got some somewhere, but it was like a 2014 Autumn's Gold or something like that.
Yep.
It was delicious.
Awesome. Yeah, totally. Start your cider cellar today.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Don't be afraid to lay them down.
Do that, I would recommend that you go to the cellar door because I think, Mark, you've created like a destination. I mean, when folks visit us, we always send them there, and often they've already been there.
Right, and they.
When people are on a mission for cider, cellar door is the place to go. And you've been a really big advocate of cider and also a trendsetter. A lot of people look up to you and want to replicate it. So,
man, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a natural thing. It deserves to be right there alongside with all the great wines that we have, and Yeah, it deserves it. So I will tell you that it's been a very long, I think, how long has the shop been open now? 8 years or something like that?
Well, the Commons was shut down for like 7 of them.
Yeah, I know. But, you know, we're seeing less of the, what is cider? Like we have, you know, all these years of customers coming in because they see that we have cider. They come in and they ask us literally, what is cider? And we really have had to back off, I think, that spiel more and more each year, where we're having to explain people like what real cider is. So I think collectively throughout our region, which is now being thrust into like the stratosphere for being, I think, like the best cider in the country, if not the world. Yeah. I think collectively we are all educating, and
definitely.
Yeah, and we're really, really, really like getting the message out, and people are getting it, and they're.
It's only taken a decade.
That's it. It's only taken
a decade. That's fast.
So when your kids take over the store,
yeah, they won't have to.
They won't have to do these
questions of what is cider. So we do have another question from Paul. He said, would it be possible to make cryo-extracted ice cider in New York State off the vine versus freezing the juice? So I think he's asking if it, you know, you can squeeze the apples off the tree.
It would be possible. What you need to do is have a variety that you know is very, very sticky to its stem. So there are some varieties, and a lot of times they're crab apples. You see somebody has like an ornamental crab apple and it has these beautiful red fruits, and then it freezes and it frosts and they kind of turn brown, but they like stick on the tree. And then there's some varieties of apples, like larger apples, that will do that as well. So in New York State, because you don't get a reliable freeze in November the way you might in Quebec or something like that, you need to plant varieties that hold the apples on all winter. And there are some, but I think that would be like the big criteria.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess it's probably that time. Maybe we should wrap it up. Definitely want to thank you guys for coming on and chatting with us. Keep up the good work. We love your ciders, and you know, keep putting out the good stuff.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks.
This was amazing, you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hey, before you go, I wanted to just I want to make sure people know what else is coming for Cider Week Finger Lakes. So Eve, Cidery, Autumn, and Ezra, you have some stuff coming up, right? So next Friday, I think it is, you're involved in this panel about ciders of place. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Autumn's doing that.
Yeah, so our dear colleague, Eric Schatt of Redbird Orchard Cider, and the author of probably the most prolific Finger Lakes wine reviews on Instagram, Wino Dino, and I are doing a panel, and Wino Dino is Adrian Prieto, and we're going to send him a flight of ciders, and he's going to taste them and review them on the spot. And the ciders are all ciders that were, you know, grown in our orchards. And Eric's been farming his orchard for over a decade, and we've been farming ours for 2. And so we're going to talk about how it is that they express the place where they were grown.
And when is that? That's on Friday, Scott?
Yeah.
It's on Friday. Yeah, it's going to be on Friday. Everybody can go to ciderweekflx.com to find out more about the events that are coming up. And then you guys also have a really awesome virtual harvest video, which I'm super excited to share with anybody. I can tell you behind the scenes, I've seen it. It's amazing. And that's going to be next Saturday. So we'll look forward to sharing that with you all then. This has been really awesome. Mark, you know, we haven't met in person. I'm actually going to come up. I'll be up there starting, I think, on Wednesday. So you're one of my first stops is to stop by Cellar Door and check you guys out. Cool. Thank you so much for all you do. I loved everything you were saying, of course, about how it's getting easier and easier to not have to tell the story about cider, and people know more and more about what it is. So thank you for being a part of that and making that happen.
My pleasure. My
duty. This was really awesome. I also want to give a big shout out to Kendall Blizzard, who from Visit Ithaca. She made a comment about just how much she was enjoying this and such a big fan. We're a big fan of her work as well. So yeah, this is super awesome. Thank you all so much for joining. Like I said, check out ciderweekflx.com. Autumn, I want to just officially say that, you know, I'm a summer person and I'm not a huge fan of the fall, but I think your comment about, you know, the crisp air and the mice and the apples on the ground and the wood fire in the background kind of got me really excited about the fall. So thank you for that.
My favorite season.
I think you pretty much nailed it. So yeah, so I think that's great. Thank you so much again, Mark. This was really awesome. And Autumn and Ezra, as always, thank you so much. And that's it. We'll see you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Cider Week Finger Lakes is brought to you by the New York Cider Association and is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors.